Hi class, it just dawned on me that I never really went over the annotated bib checklist with you in class, so I am going to go through this with you now via this video. So the first requirement is that you have 6 resources and they're in alphabetical order. And my suggestion is, again, to make sure that you check these with me once you have these sources. Scholarly articles have to be from a peer-reviewed journal. So New York Times, Washington Post, those are not going to work. WebMD, it has to be an actual journal. So you have to go on Google Scholar and your hack database to find those. And abstracts will not work. You need to have the full text either electronically, or you can print it out if you find it on the hack database to show me that you have more than just the abstract. You have to have one popular article, which is the magazine or the newspaper. There you can use the Washington Post. WebMD is actually considered magazine source. So that would be a popular article, any newspaper type of source. 2 professional websites. It could be a professional organization. It could be a government site. You can start at Healthy People 2020 and you should be able to find sources from there. But your national foundations, American Heart Association, but remember they're doing a lot of things with sleep, so you may be able to find stuff there. People found things on sites like My Plate when it had to do with nutritional resources. So you just need to really look around and find those professional organizations that are out there. And then 1 chapter from your textbook. You have to make sure that you double check your APA for all of these, and if there is a DOI number, you must use the full DOI number. And sometimes there's letters in the DOI number, so don't cut it off at the letters. You can also have retrieved from and then a link to that source. And again, if I click that link and it goes to an abstract, I will be looking for proof that you have the full text. When you do your textbook citation, I want you to double check that on Purdue OWL. And also when there's no author listed, is the source the author? Sometimes with government agencies that is the case. So then you could move the source title to the authors. If it's not, you move the title of the article to the author's place. That's always the standard. And you can check Purdue OWL for these different situations. So this is Purdue OWL, where they show you how to cite the textbook chapter. We don't want to cite the whole book because we're only using a section. So you can see here how to do that, and then it gives you a sample down here. So the authors, the year that it was published, and then the title of the chapter, and then the editors. You're actually putting the initials of the editor first, unlike the authors. And then you're going to have your actual book title, notice the lowercase, pages that you used, and your location that it was published, and the name of the publisher. Purdue OWL also shows us how to cite a web page or online content, and this one is your basic format right here. So following this is your basic format. If the author is not listed, start with the title, and if the publication is not listed, you put ND. And this is a sample that has no author. However, if you found it in a magazine or newspaper that is an actual published item, but there is an online version to it, you would then put the name of the newspaper or the article. So if you found a New York Times article, you would put that in there. So just make sure whether it is solely an online content or is something that's actually been published in a magazine and is in print format also, you would do the name of the magazine or a newspaper and then still follow all of the other protocol. You want to make sure that your resources are listed using a hanging indent and that the fonts and spacing are the same and consistent, and it's 12 font with Times New Roman, and you should have a title. If you use my template, you would have the first page, and you want to leave that if possible because that is going to be a really good sample because it's exactly what it should look like at college level. But you do not need to use the template. Your spelling and grammar should be checked and double checked. You want to avoid fluff, which is really simplistic words, and we tend to repeat them a lot. Good, bad, things, stuff, you, really. You do not want to say you. You're not going to say you need to drink more water. And that's why I am doing research, so that you can learn to drink more water. So you're not writing this to me. Avoid overusing the common words. So I use a thesaurus a lot to find a different way to say the same thing, basically. You are going to feel very repetitious. So now let's look closer at the annotation question. So who is the author? I obviously already know their name, but you're going to say a little bit about them if possible. And so sometimes you'll be able to find things about each of the authors in the article, the bottom of the article. Sometimes it'll tell you more about them. I know in the book, there should be something in the book that tells you a little bit more about the author. So you can simply find it from there. So talking about the author, if the author is the staff, then you'll talk about that. This was written by the staff members of the Centers for Disease Control. That's it, okay? We don't really know the name of the person who wrote it. Information source, this is where you tell me exactly what this is. Is this a popular source? Is this a scholarly source? Is this your textbook? Is this one of your professional websites, or is it a government website? Make sure to be very specific about what it is. And the information source tells us a lot about who the intended audience is. So if it is a scholarly article, then you're going to say the intended audience for this information is researchers and professionals in the field of whatever. And maybe it's a government site, so CDC, that is for the general public. And it's also for agencies that are looking to possibly find the most recent health statistics. But here's where we get a little tricky. You need to figure out and evaluate if the author is presenting the information in a biased manner. So bias means it leans one way or the other. So explain if there is bias, and if you feel if there's any bias on the part of the author in the writing, and how can you tell that? So first of all, as writers, we all have bias. Everybody has bias. So it's very hard to try to not be biased when you're writing. So they may give an alternative side or an alternative argument. If you see that in there, okay, then they're trying to be unbiased. So if they're trying to sway you one way or the other, then there is some bias. So you want to make sure to note that. Do you believe the information presented was reliable? And if so, how did you determine this? So how do you figure out if it's reliable? Well, if it's peer-reviewed and fact-checked, if it went through an editorial process, you want to mention that. New York Times, Washington Post, it's not peer-reviewed, but it does go through an editorial process. Was the study or experiment in the research, was it reliable? Was there a lot of people that participated in it? So if you're looking at a study and there's only 20 participants in the study versus your other scholarly article had 1,000 participants, well, which one's more reliable? Probably the one with the larger number of participants. So you can use that. Is the author credible to write on the topic? So going back to finding out about your author, I mean, let's talk about even our book. Who's our author? Can she credible? Like, can she write a book about health? What gives her that credibility? So there are some credentials that she has that say, yeah, she is pretty credible. So if you can find those credentials, you could list that. Look for references or sources. Where did they find this information? Is it listed? So those are some other ways to figure out if an article is credible. What did you learn from the source? Be as specific as possible. How could you use this in your behavior change project? So pull that paper out. Look at all the things you're going to have to write about, and here's where you get to tell me where you're going to use this. So maybe this had tips and tricks for drinking more water. Well, guess what? You need that when you're trying to set up your plan and your short-term goals. You might be able to use some of those tips and tricks. So that's where you would plug that in. If it's about sleep and how it affects your mental health, Well, in the beginning of the paper, it's going to talk about linking your target behavior to all the dimensions of health. You could give some facts that you found out of this source, some information, and explain that you're going to use it at that portion where you need to explain how sleep affects overall health. So hopefully that will help you. And if you need a little more guidance, again, use the template that I have for you. That is a gem. It is a tool for you to use. The spacings are already there for you. But you can go to Purdue OWL and you can find a sample APA annotation. It's a little tricky to find. So how I had to find it was I went on just Google and put annotated bibliography sample APA, and Purdue OWL popped up right away. And here's how I found it. So you can see here they're using a book. You can see the spacing and even some of the wording, how they used it. Again, you need to find things a little bit differently. It's not going to be exactly the same as far as content, but you can at least see here how things should be lining up. If any other questions, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. All right, see ya. Good luck. Bye.